Good morning and welcome. This is Michael Bartlett and Merrylin LeBlanc with deep dives with new perspectives between Christmas and New Year's with all these. I don't know about you. You got your Aquarian sun. I got my Aquarian sun. Jupiter and Saturn are now in Aquarius, and I don't know about you, but I feel some pressure actually. How about you?
Actually, I felt pressure right before that. And maybe it was because of all the work that we were doing as astrologers for people and the holidays and connecting with people. And it was like as an Aquarian, when a friend calls, um, I I I don't mind saying, "Hey, can I call you back in an hour? I'm busy right now." But if I have to say, "Can I call you back in 3 days?" That is just too hard for me to do. And so consequently there was an hour, 2-hour conversation here and another one there, and it was like I just noticed that even though we're quarantined somewhat during the holiday season, um people are reaching out and connecting via mostly the phone and some of this technology as well. And I was just overwhelmed with all of that. It was a little bit so there's a part of me, you have to remember, of course, you have all that energy in the 12th house as well, but my Neptune is just within, like, it's 5-6 degrees of my ascendant. And so there's a part of me that needs to retreat. And people who've been, you haven't yet been to my house yet, but once this COVID thing has is going away, you and your partner are the first people that are going to come to dinner at my house,
Yeah.
so that you will understand that I live in a retreat. I'm I'm in the middle of 7 acres of very wooded property. I mean, it's really an extension of the Santa Fe National Forest, although I'm not in the forest, but it's down the road, not far, or down the hill if I want to just walk down the hill. and and so it's a retreat. It's peace and quiet. And I spent the last couple days breathing deeply and actually out there with the trees.
You
Yeah.
know, it's an interesting thing. You and I have so many parallels. I mean, we're both Aquarius suns, Scorpio moons. We both, I think you were born in LA, right? I was born
Right.
in the Bay Area.
LA.
Yeah, and
LA.
then you moved up, and then I think you grew up in the Bay Area where I did my growing up. And so, there's something, and we both are on land. I'm on 2.5 acres, you're on 7 acres. I think there's something about what I've learned over the years, especially with my 12th house Scorpio moon, is that I need psychic space around me. I like being like in a condo or a townhouse or an apartment complex or in a big city. That I was able to do it. I think my Sag rising and other things, but all my Earth helped me really do it. But the truth is, there's a peacefulness here in Santa Fe, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's like one piece of property per district available here in Santa Fe right now. There's so many people moving from the coast, moving from the big cities to places like this right now because they're actually really literally havens. It's a very, there's really nothing. The biggest environmental issue we have to worry about here, as you know, is drought and fires, and maybe
You know,
something about Los Alamos.
that same thing has happened in Colorado, and it's happening also in Oregon and Washington State, where I mean, I know people who live in those areas, and the property values have skyrocketed, much like we associate with New York City and California now, where unless you've had that home for 20, 30, 40 years, it's been, you can't touch it today unless you're a multimillionaire almost. It's
I
like,
was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and they were like, "Oh, well, we want to move and get something different." But the truth is anything that we go and move into is going to be like a million, million and a half. And even if they sell their place and all, it's just it's obscene. And so it's no surprise that there are all these people who are without housing. And
well,
how can you afford housing when the prices are so high?
I think that's going to change though with this Jupiter Saturn cycle that began uh, on the solstice, the 21st of December, and I really feel like and COVID as well, that the structures of how we live here in the United States are going to undergo a metamorphosis. How fast that will happen, we'll only know in retrospect.
Well,
But
I love before you and I started recording today, I love that you brought up the fact and helped correct us. By the way, we had this really great talk on Saturday, which, kind of was really intense for all of us and all these other issues that went on. But one of the things we said is that Jupiter is going to be in Aquarius for a year. And what I loved was that you brought up the fact that Jupiter is going to actually go into Pisces in May for a little bit and linger back. And what I love about that, it's like Jupiter's going to go, Jupiter's in business oriented Capricorn. Now it's in humanitarian oriented Aquarius. And then it's going to go in its ruling sign of Pisces, the modern ruler of Pisces. And then it's going to go back into Aquarius where it is the esoteric ruler. So for me, it's like this blending. Maybe there'll be something a little more compassion, a little more understanding. How do we take care of everyone? How do we make it so that everyone is okay? Jupiter and Pisces is literally the all that is that all that is. Neptune, of course, is that next octave.
right. And one of the things too that I pointed out about this cycle is that the outlet of it, no matter where these 20-year cycles occur in one's chart, the outlet always goes back to the signs that they rule, which are Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now they happen to be in the middle of those signs with this particular coming together. And that the last time that happened, that they were in the middle of the signs of that they are connected to very strongly, was in 1960-61 with the conjunction in Capricorn. And of course, that was the beginning of a zeitgeist change in the country. It was sort of the hippie movement started to emerge, and there were changes, and people often equate those changes to the Uranus Pluto
Mm.
conjunction in Virgo, which indeed they were. The more we have these outer planets that affect the collective at large, the social conditions, social interactions, etc., the stronger the effect. And so, of course, in the 60s, we had a double whammy, and so there were huge changes in the Catholic Church. There were huge, women's liberation, even though the 19th Amendment had been created or adopted by the states, ratified 40 years before. There were still, and there still are, some issues with women, but it's change. I mean, it's evolving. Change on a personal, human, and our one-to-one interactions happens much slower than the collective, to some extent, in my opinion. And it depends on who you're interacting with. But we can look back to that period in the 60s and expect um, comparable changes that are going to change the way we live as a society for the next several decades, I believe.
Well, it's time. We have to really find a new way to be in relationship to one another. I mean, understanding Black Lives Matter and understanding everyone's lives matter and understanding, finding ways to make it so that we are more accepting, so there isn't one prevailing viewpoint and that there are more. I mean, I think that's one of the real benefits, especially when Pluto joins the gang, in a couple
I
of years.
was just thinking of Pluto, and in 2023, it's going to go into Aquarius. And
Oh, I know. It's going to be on my son in 2023. So
yeah, that's, I when Pluto was on my moon, and you have Scorpio moon as well, I I was going like, holy, I've got to deal with my mother issues. And, my mother and I were never close when I was a child. And in adult years, there would sometimes a year would go by that we had not even communicated with each other. She'd send me a birthday card, or a Christmas card or something like that. But there was nothing for me. And I made a conscious choice to change that. And I cannot tell you how much, this is very Plutonian, how much my life, my relationship with her was enriched because I chose to take those steps. And and there were things that she told me that were very good for me to know, actually, that things that were going on family wise that I had not a clue about, um, being somewhat independent. And
Well,
it's funny because
I like to think of those transits as being like invitations in a way. I mean, I like how you do it. It's like you choose because it's like there's a doorway that gets presented, right? And you can go like, oh, do I want to? The opportunity here is to maybe look at it a different way, or am I going to like keep that old wallpaper up? Am I going to keep that image that I have locked in my mind? But the thing with Pluto, right, is I don't think you really have a choice. Do you think you had a choice?
well, I think you have a choice about some things, but right, no, because it hits you if you don't respond. And there were things I didn't respond to or didn't really check into. I used to say this, you're reminding me of things I used to say in consultations. I don't say it so much anymore, but Pluto often comes up to you with a 2x4 and whacks you upside the head. I'm not literally, but
Right.
I've had
Well,
that
actually, I mean,
experience.
there are times where actually people will say, that, I mean, it's funny, you'll say those things and people will look at, that shock look like, how did you know? That's what happened to me yesterday or something.
Exactly. No, it's because Pluto is wrapped up with our soul's agenda
Yeah.
so strongly, as are the other water planets. And
Mm.
that includes the moon, it includes Jupiter and Neptune together. They all have to do with our consciousness, our levels of consciousness. And one of the things I do with the moon cycles is really address our daily habits. They're ruled by the moon. And, this coming Saturday's Moonwise show is recorded and everything. And I did an interview with Martin Goldsmith, who's recently been doing research on the planets, and he had done a little essay on the moon. And I said, "Oh, I'd like to hear about it. So come on and talk to me about it." And he was saying he came to this conclusion that it does talk there are connections with our emotional states with the moon, but he noticed in his research that it's more connected to our everyday habits. And I completely concurred with him, because often our daily habits are caught up in our subconscious mind, or you can even say unconscious mind. I mean, different psychologists will divide those in different ways, but it's those things, that if I look at, oh, where's the moon in my chart, and then at the end of the day really journal about it, like the morning pages, but do them as the night pages. It's like things pop into your head that you're going, oh my God, and where did that come from? And there are psychologists who say actually it comes partly from the brain. They're making the distinction between the mind and the brain, but it's our consciousness is, I think, not totally made up of this body. It's made up of the soul within, which is more the mind. And there's parts of it that are really conscious to us, and there's other parts of it that aren't. And when you want to know about those parts in yourself, you can look to the moon. You can look, and you mentioned at the beginning with this moon in Scorpio and how you need a certain amount of psychic private space. Well, Scorpio, and I have Scorpio moon as well. I mean, it's even though it's a in the public area of the natural zodiac, and there's a lot of interaction with people that go on with that sign, naturally speaking. It yet it likes to keep certain things private or secret.
Mhm.
Doesn't it? Because there's a vulnerability with water, with all the water signs. There is a vulnerability. The Cancer has its crab shell, and Scorpio has its stinger, and it has a little bit of a shell too. And Pisces, well, those scales on the fish, and some fish can be poisonous, and like the stingray or the even jellyfish can
Scorpion.
have ways, so they all kind of do this protective thing because of the sensitivities that are there. And the sensitivities have to do with more than the physical world. So, you just, and part of that wanting, like, you live somewhat removed from other people, compared to typical neighborhoods. And so do I. And for me, it's a retreat. It's like, I can breathe. I can just not, have all these psychic interactions that can just um, chew away at you.
Yeah. What I love, what I hear you speaking all about is like, liminal space, right? Liminal walking. The moon is like is our ability to be, the moon exists in the day sky as well as in the night sky. We see it more strongly at night, of course, but it has the ability to do both. The sun is completely gone at night. It's the absence of light, but yet we have the reflection of that sun from the moon onto us, giving us a certain light. So, it's like, how do we walk back and forth? It was when you were talking about journaling, it's like I see like this wonderful, like a farmer's field, and the farmer going along with a tiller, and that's like what writing is, right? That when we write, when we do like the morning pages, or when we write anyway, like there's this way that things get germinated, things that are down and come up from underneath, they get presented. I think, and I don't know, sometimes I wonder, like, is it because my Scorpio moon is sextiling my Mars up of my midheaven in Virgo? But it's like, I think Scorpio, while it wants to be very, very private, there's a part that wants to reveal, it wants to remove the shame of it, because the truth is, Scorpio is revealing these very essential parts of life that have become denigrated, disenfranchised, so to speak. When we think about how, death, how we treat death in the world, look at, even how death is going on now, and how, considering
Oh,
like how 100 years ago,
and
what,
how, oh, I was just to say how isolating it is right now,
yeah.
where families can't say goodbye in person. This is very sad.
But but that is, when we started moving, around the eight, well, I mean, however long, humans have been migrating around, but whenever we started moving and leaving our countries to move somewhere else, there was a chance that was the last time we saw someone anyway. So I mean, it's very interesting. It's kind of bringing home. One thing about Aquarius, it can become very idealized about things. But I think the real important part that's going to be going on through this period is, how do we ground ourselves? How do we make it something that is reality? How do we deal with what the reality of is of it, and not have to have it as this idea of it?
How
Maybe
do
when
we, yeah,
it comes,
actually enliven it?
right. Right. How do we ground it into the reality that life is? I think that's the kind of chunk. But I think with all these planets are going through, and then, in February, there's this huge stellium, like 5 planets are going to be in Aquarius. I'm looking forward to when we talk about that, because it's a very, I'll put it this way. I remember a gentleman coming up to me at NORWAC, and he said, "Oh, no astrologer knows how to read my chart." I don't know if I've told you this story before, Merrylin, but and I like, I didn't take the bait, because it's one of those things that people do at conferences, and so I let it be. And a little bit later, he's like, do you want to see my chart? Like, I don't know why no one's able to look at my, able to give me a reading for my chart. And so I said, sure. So he shows me his chart. Well, he had like 7 planets in Aquarius in the first house.
Oh boy.
who, and I just looked at it and I was like, oh, I know exactly why no one can tell you about your chart. And he like looks at me dumbfounded. And I said, why? And I said, you're not here to be defined by anyone else, right? 7 planets in Aquarius in the first house. Oh my God, no one is here. No one can tell you who you are, honey. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what gets presented.
Because you're like, I mean, were some of those planets the sun and the moon as well? Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, because you are who you believe you are. Period.
Right. And so like I almost felt like I wanted to say like, okay, that'll be $300. That was a full reading, because to be honest, that is a life understanding when you start to understand that you're here to be your own archetype, which I think, to be honest, I think that's the other thing that's going to be really coming out in this time is understanding we're all mutants. I wrote that book, Astrological Mavericks, but like I'm kind of morphing it into this idea of like, you know what, we're all mutants. One thing that astrology has taught me so beautifully is that like Mercury in the different signs shows you the different ways people process things, process intellectual things that maybe aren't, when it's processed in water, it isn't really intellectual, is it? And yet there's a way it has to be. So what we get to see, or someone born with a Mercury retrograde, there's a whole different way they process. And it's beautiful the way that they do that. But the harm, and you and I have talked about this before, is when an astrologer looks at it like, oh, that, you have, Mercury in Pisces, and it's squaring, Neptune, so you're never going to have, no one's ever going to really understand you. It's like, well, people are, if you step into a place of vision, they are going to understand you if you step into this place of where you're taking these larger ideas and kind of chunking them down in a way that is relatable, right? Because that's the goal, I think, of the squares.
Right. Yeah, right. The manifestation of one's own creativity. And you think about poets like Yeats and Shakespeare and many others. I mean, that's what they were doing. I mean, I'm not referring to their charts so much as just the fact that they were, they're an unusual chart has the ability, and a very stressful chart has the ability to stress to present something that is very unique, very different. And we have a lot of that on this. I mean, over the centuries, the parade of creative people who have left, a legacy regarding their creativity. It's amazing. Absolutely. I mean, we have museums full of things like that. Just
And the funny thing is we in the past we've had this idea like, oh, well, that's that person out there. It's very much kind of like a projection thing or a full moon thing, right? Or opposition, like, oh, it's that person out there. And it's like, no, what is the interesting brilliance? Some of the interesting shows I'm seeing on Netflix have to do with these people that perceive themselves as absolutely normal in a sense, but it's like, what is normal? Normal is a relative term, right? I think the only thing that's really normal is that we all eat, and even that is irregular how often that happens, by choice or by requirement or by how life demands are. We all usually sleep, but there's certain things I think we have in common, but there are these whole ways that we all go off and do these gorgeous unique representations of life that show other people how they can be unique. And I think that's the beautiful joy about astrology. And I hope maybe next time we can talk about, we talked about a little bit beforehand, but the other topic that I enjoy is like the interweaving of human design, and with that is kind of this interesting way that it plays.
which is another way of looking at astrology and um, adding on some other systems to it as well, and some uniqueness. And I'm, this is very Aquarian, actually, the way we're talking. And this last point you were making about individuals, and I was thinking about education and children, and when they when they hit midlife or their peak after their first Saturn return, and into their 30s, what they may be contributing to this earth may be very different from the traditional kinds of schooling that you and I went through. I'm not crazy about Zoom interaction learning or whatever, but I what the message is to me, because I don't see, even though some people think that children are, they're less susceptible to this virus, but that's not necessarily true. And and so if I were a parent, I think I'd be homeschooling at this point. And there's a lot of homeschooled children throughout our lifetimes who have made wondrous contributions to humanity or to their own personal lives. But I think there's going to be some kind of innovation that is going to impact the way we live on the planet. And we're already seeing that with youth movements around climate change, thanks to
Greta.
Greta Thunberg and other young people, that it's the world that they're going to have to live in, because even though we might be able to literally deal and live with this coronavirus in a way that we can socialize to outside of these things called computers and other instruments. Climate change is still looming. It's with us already, and uh, that to me is sometimes the elephant in the room that is rarely talked about. And I think this is a precursor to prepare us for certain lifestyle changes, because some of the changes that we'll probably have to go through are going to be harder than just staying at home and staying socially distanced. That's my
And
take
then when
on it.
that Pluto gets into Aquarius in 3 years, I think we're gonna see, is there, will there be, will there be other viruses that appear? Will there be other ways in which that we understand we have to
It'll
reform?
be the transformation of humanity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Reformatting. I
So,
mean, in a sense, right?
so we either, I have this thing back in the 80s when Pluto was in Scorpio, squaring those of us who have Pluto in Leo, squaring our Plutos. I used to think, well, I think the human race is going to morph, and some humans are going to become more mechanical, and others will become more organic. And and I have told this story to several people, and one friend sent me this past year, she sent me a link where I believe it was Elon Musk or the other guy, the Amazon guy, can't slip it anyway, who who is testing out implants in the brain.
Okay, that's not-
and she said, the Borg are already with us.
Well, I mean, when you
And
think, there's a whole group. Oh my gosh, this goes off on such huge other tangents. I mean, there are a significant number of individuals on the planet worth significant amounts of money who are getting very interesting things done. They're going in and getting their blood platelets cleaned. They're going in and doing all these treatments and things that, that most of us, can't even remotely begin to afford. In this idea of, perpetuating themselves. It's going to be interesting to see, in sci-fi, we're seeing these things where consciousness is now being stored on hard drives, or you can visit, there's a great show on Amazon called Upload. Like after you die, you can have your consciousness put into the system. And it's so great because this is so funny, Pluto and Capricorn kind of an idea, because it's this idea where the people who are still alive on the physical plane are paying for you to remain, to be able to be interacting with them. So all the things that you want to do, quote, on the other side in this kind of like video game, in a sense, so to speak, costs money. So the wealthier you are, you get to have these things. And then it's so funny because when you run out of your money, runs out of its account, you turn black and white and you slow down, and then you basically stop and you don't move until your account gets repaid. But it's such this very interesting, like Pluto and Leo. I mean, it's interesting, right? It's a Pluto and Leo meet Pluto, Capricorn, Pluto heading into Aquarius, how do we deal with this consciousness? And there are other video things like Altered Carbon is another one where they have this idea where it's the stacks. Yeah, you can change bodies because you have this like chip thing you can put in that you can move your consciousness around, and the very wealthy can continue to do that and afford to buy younger bodies that are more
Okay.
yeah, but very
Okay.
Aquarian. Sorry.
The biggest problem with this is is the soul. Do you believe? I mean, energy does, and I think what they're doing, it's based on energy doesn't die. And so energy stays with the consciousness and we can capture the consciousness. But in my belief system, the consciousness goes on to another realm. And I don't know if I've said this to you, but the not too distant past, I had come to the point, because I read most of these. I haven't read all of these near death experiences, but it just seemed to me that most of them were saying the same thing, that they were seeing the same thing. And I thought, is that because of the beliefs they have? They've heard about others and they believe that, we're going to see our parents, we're going to see the people that we've loved, et cetera, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
what Beth would say.
And 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 that's all nice and good. I don't have, that's not a problem for me. But I thought, well, what if there are other realms of possibility? So if you believe, yeah, I want my consciousness stored in a machine here, you're um actually keeping your consciousness in a way stuck on the planet Earth on a given time and space, because you're not really interacting with the evolution on the Earth, so you don't know where. I mean, it would be great to be
Are
able
you?
to ask. It would be great to be able to ask Socrates a question, and see what his consciousness has to say, or Aristotle or Plato or whatever. But but there's there but part of wisdom is one's part of it, is one's relationship with the earth and experience of the earth and experience of what's in the earth. And I kind of think the most important part of that is with nature, not necessarily with our inventions. So there might be some benefits to consult to these people whose consciousness is stuck in this robotic kind of contraption. Um, but what if you can visit other universes and experience this is what I love about science fiction, and experience totally different kinds of ways of being that might not be possible in the experience here.
I
But
agree.
yeah, but I must say, recently, I forget the connection, but somebody was telling me about this neurosurgeon, Alexander is his last name, Eben Alexander, and he's written several books because he went into a coma for a week, and the coma was so severe that his colleagues did not think that he would survive, and in their training they thought that consciousness was connected to the brain and so it would be impaired. There's another woman who was a neuroscientist of some sort, I don't remember exact title, Jill Bolte Taylor, or I think is her last name. She wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. She had a major stroke and took her 7 years to recover, but she knew what was going on the whole time. She just couldn't communicate to get it out there. And so to me, our consciousness is connected to our souls more so than it's connected. I think the physical body is a temple for the soul.
The
And
vehicle.
so yes, it manifests things about our souls. So there is this kind of interaction. But I would the idea of being stuck in some contraption here on earth after I died is not appealing. I
You don't
want more,
want
as an Aquarian, I want more freedom.
you don't want me to You don't want me to pay for you to be in my own personal video game for the rest of eternity?
No, no. I'll have, uh,
Well, it's
I will
great. I
go
mean, what you
on.
bring up is such a great part of Aquarius too. There is such a freedom need, and I think what's so nice about with all this going in with the concentration of planets in February is going to be this, to really embrace who we are individually, right? And be okay with that, and not and it's not part of what life is ephemeral, right? It's about the
Yeah,
eternal now.
right. I think these are ideas thought up by young people, because the older I get, my mother in her mid 80s started to say, I wish I would die. I'm ready to leave. And that used to really irritate me. Um, and I'm not at the age yet that she was at when she started to do that.
Are you starting to think
But
that?
I've gone through the second Saturn return, okay? And that, I think the second Saturn return triggers that sort of thing where you begin to realize, the next 30 years are not going to be like the last 30 years. And not that there isn't purpose or wonder or beauty or enjoyment of the earth. That's all there. But there's certain things, there's just certain things that are just repetitive after a while.
When you also know that your future is not as long as your past. And I think, it's a rule, hopefully a ruling out of those things that no longer, I mean, I used to like what Alan would say, non-regenerative emotional patterns, be they relationships, be they our daily habits, like we talked about earlier, or the way we look at things. I mean, I think that's the other thing that's going to look at, because Aquarius has that wonderful, Aquarius is the last fixed sign, and yet with Uranus involved with it, it doesn't really get the luxury of having its way, right? It's like there's always, like in the middle of our deep thoughts, there's someone banging on the door. There's just something that requires us to have to come back to the realities of Earth. It's something that makes us have to deal with these things that we want to be above, right? And that's the other thing with Aquarius, like the things not wanting to get one's hands dirty, sort of thing.
Well, the thing that you're making me think also of that science fiction book, Time Enough to Love. It was Heinlein. I'm not sure if I have the right author, uh, where the key character is Lazarus. And they had discovered a way to clone the human completely. And he was the first clone. He went through the first cloning. And after 1,000 years, he had done everything. He'd done every possible occupation you could think of, this and that. He wanted to die. And because he was the prototype, they didn't want, the other clones didn't want him to die. But it was sort of like time enough. I don't, maybe the title is Time Enough to Love or something like that. And it was interesting because, it's sort of like, when you think about the universe as an ongoing creative being, you think there's unlimited, infinite possibilities. And they don't have to be done in this human form. That's,
I
but
love
maybe,
that. Yeah, because
maybe we could live 2 or 3 lifetimes in this human form. I don't know.
I think something's going to be presented where I think during our lifetime we're going to see an extension sort of a thing for some people, and but these are really great things to think about, because I think it's very, it's an interesting thing. Like if we could get the soul to be really working with the personality, then it would stay around as long as it really needs to. I mean, which it kind of does anyway, but maybe it'd be more directed. I don't know. But we're going off into more philosophy than we probably need to. I feel like we probably should wrap this up before we go off on a whole other tangent. So
Right.
people can reach me at
Well, all
michael.com
of this.
or at 505-690-3860. Thank you, Merrylin, for another talk. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Michael. All of this is extensions of Aquarius's mind. So yes, I'm Merrylin LeBlanc, and you can visit my website, moonwiseastrology.com, all one word, moonwiseastrology.com. see what kind of work I do. And there's a link even on my Moonwise Moon Minute page in that website that takes you to KSFR's podcast, where you can always listen to my show, which is called Moonwise and the Moon Minute. So we'll see you next week. And Michael, have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Everyone, if you like our channel, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, share with your friends, comment. We're here to share insights, and hopefully you're enjoying what you're hearing. Take care. Bye-bye. Happy New
Okay,
Year,
bye.
everyone.